Believe in that, for real. That's it right there. But if you believe in God, we have in hell.
Yo, what's happening? It's your Uncle Snoop, the D-O-double-G, right here in the building. Before we get into this real G-Funk tale, I gotta ask you for a little something. If you want more stories from someone who was really there, hit that subscribe button. We're about to take a trip down memory lane, hip-hop history that changed everything. This is the story of Death Row Records, told straight from the dog's mouth. I saw the good, the bad, and everything in between. This ain't just some history lesson, this is my life, and the life of my homeboys and producers. Death Row was more than music. It was a movement, a lifestyle, an empire. So get comfortable, light one up if that's your thing, and prepare to hear the real uncut story. Hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and let's get into the rise and fall of one of the most legendary labels ever. Let's go. Before Death Row, hip-hop was all East Coast. The sound, the style, the attitude, it all came out of New York. The city was the birthplace of hip-hop, and for years, it set the standard for what rap was supposed to be. The beats were gritty, the rhymes were sharp, and the culture was deeply rooted in the streets of the Big Apple. New York had the crown. Every major label, every radio station, every magazine, everyone looked to New York for what was next. The city was the epicenter, and the rest of the country was just trying to catch up. But out west, we had our own story, our own struggles, our own style. Life in Los Angeles was different, sunshine and palm trees, but also tension, hustle, and a whole lot of ambition. We saw the world through a different lens, and we wanted our music to reflect that. We needed a sound that felt like California, sunny, but with that street edge. Something that captured the laid-back vibe of cruising down the boulevard, but also the reality of life in the neighborhoods. We wanted music that was smooth, but still hit hard. That's where Death Row came in and kicked the door down. We weren't just making music, we were making a movement. We brought together the best talent, the boldest voices, and the realest stories from the West Coast. We created G-Funk, gangster funk. Smooth, but real. It was a new sound, built on heavy bass lines, funky synths, and laid-back grooves. It was music you could ride to, party to, and live your life to. Dr. Dre was the mastermind, flipping Parliament funkadelic samples into something new. He took the old-school funk and gave it a West Coast twist, layering in hard-hitting drums and unforgettable hooks. Dre's vision turned classic sounds into the future of hip-hop. When you heard a Death Row track, you knew it instantly. The sound was unmistakable, slick, confident, and larger than life. It was the kind of music that made you feel like you were part of something bigger. It was the soundtrack to Cruising Down Crenshaw, a revolution in sound. Our music blasted from car stereos, house parties, and clubs all over the city. It became the heartbeat of LA, and soon, the whole world was listening. We changed the culture, how rappers looked, talked, and moved. The West Coast swagger, the fashion, the slang, it all started to influence the entire hip-hop scene. Suddenly everyone wanted to dress like us, talk like us, and move like us. Suddenly everyone wanted to be like us. Our style was everywhere, from the way people walked to the way they wore their hats. We set trends that went far beyond music. We put Long Beach, Compton, and South Central on the map. These places became legendary, known around the world for their music, their stories, and their impact on the culture. Death Row wasn't just a label, it was a statement. We were here, we were talented, and we weren't asking for permission. We demanded respect, and we got it, changing the way the industry looked at West Coast artists forever. Albums like The Chronic and Doggy Style became cultural landmarks. They broke records, topped charts, and inspired a new generation of artists to tell their own stories, their own way. We proved you could be from the hood, tell your truth, and still win big. Our success showed that authenticity mattered more than anything, and that real stories could change the world. We changed the rules, and hip-hop was never the same. The West Coast became a powerhouse, and the game was flipped for good. That's the power of Death Row. We didn't just make music, we made history, and the world is still feeling the impact today. Everybody knows Suge Knight, the face, the muscle, the vision. Suge had the drive to build an empire, but he didn't do it alone. David Kenner was the legal brain, locking down contracts and keeping things tight. Michael, Harry O. Harris, even from prison, provided the seed money to get us started. Suge and Harry O's wife set up Godfather Entertainment, and Death Row was born as a subsidiary. Harry O's investment was the spark. And then there was Dr. Dre, the creative genius, the sound of the label. Suge was the power, Kenner the brains, Harry O the money, and Dre the music. That was the foundation, a team that made Death Row the most dangerous and successful label in the world. Without each piece, the empire never would have stood. That's how legends are built. That's how Death Row started. The name Death Row Records set the tone from day one. We started as Future Shock Records, but it didn't fit the raw energy we had. We needed a name that hit hard, that made people pay attention. Death Row was perfect, dark, unforgettable, and intimidating. It was a metaphor. We were taking over, executing the old guard. The logo, the man in the electric chair, said it all. We weren't just another label, we were a warning, a promise, and a brand. Death Row meant power, danger, and dominance before you even heard a note. It told the world, don't mess with us. The name defined our legacy. It was the final word in hip-hop. That's Death Row. Getting Dr. Dre to leave Ruthless Records was the move that made Death Row possible. Dre was the hottest producer, but he felt cheated at Ruthless. No control, no respect. Suge Knight saw his chance and promised Dre creative freedom, ownership, and a bigger cut. Suge sold Dre the dream of being his own boss. But Eazy-E wasn't letting Dre go easy. Contracts were tight. Suge and his crew paid Eazy a visit, making it clear Dre was leaving one way or another. Whether it went down like a gangster movie or not, the result was the same. Dre was free. That was the big bang for Death Row. Without Dre, there's no Chronic, no Doggy Style, no G-Funk era. Suge's aggressive move secured the most important asset for the label. It was risky, but it changed hip-hop history. Dre's freedom was the start of everything. That's how Death Row was born. My journey to Death Row started with Dr. Dre. Back then, Dre was already a legend, a visionary who could turn any beat into a classic. I was just a hungry kid from Long Beach, trying to get my voice heard in a world that didn't always want to listen. Warren G., my stepbrother, believed in me from day one. He slipped my demo tape to Dre, and that moment changed everything. Suddenly, I was in the studio with the man behind NWA, surrounded by the energy of greatness. It felt like stepping into a new universe. Our chemistry was instant, my laid-back style over Dre's G-Funk beats. It was like we'd been making music together for years, even though we just met. Every session felt electric, like we were building something the world had never heard before. We made deep cover, and I became the first new artist signed to Death Row. That track was more than a song. It was a statement. It let everyone know that a new era was about to begin, and I was at the front of it. That was the start of the Doggy Style era. The energy was wild, the fans were hungry, and the West Coast sound was taking over. Every day felt like history in the making. Tupac's arrival was even wilder. The whole industry felt the shockwaves when Pac came to Death Row. He brought a fire and intensity that nobody else had. In 1995, Pac was in prison, broke, and betrayed by the industry. He was locked up, feeling like the world had turned its back on him. But even behind bars, his spirit was unbreakable. Suge Knight saw the opportunity. He visited Pac in prison and offered to pay his $1 million bail and legal fees for a 3-album deal. It was a bold move, the kind only Suge could pull off. He knew Pac's talent was worth every penny. For Pac, it was a lifeline. He was desperate to get back to music, to tell his story, and Death Row gave him that chance. It was more than business. It was survival. He signed, Suge posted bail, and Pac walked out of prison straight onto a jet to LA. The world watched as he stepped into freedom, ready to unleash his voice again. Now, Death Row had me, Dre, and Pac, a murderer's row of talent. The label was stacked and the competition knew it. We were a force nobody could ignore. We were untouchable, ready to dominate the industry. Every track, every show, every headline, Death Row was at the center of it all. Death Row became the epicenter of hip-hop. The streets, the clubs, the radio, everybody was talking about us. We set the trends and the world followed. The chemistry, the drama, the music, it was all real. Every day brought new challenges, but also new hits. We lived and breathed the culture, we made history, and the world was watching. Our music crossed borders, broke records, and inspired a generation. That's how legends joined the Row. It wasn't just about signing contracts, it was about changing the game together. That's how Death Row became unstoppable. The rest is history, but the legacy lives on every time you press play. Back in the mid-90s, Death Row was a powerhouse, worth hundreds of millions, maybe $750 million at its peak. We had the hits, the artists, the image, money was pouring in. But after Pac's death and Dre's departure, things fell apart. Suge's legal troubles and bankruptcy in 2006 dropped the value. The label became a shadow, passed between companies, its worth tied to the classic catalog. Today, after I bought the brand back, experts estimate Death Row's value at $50 to $100 million. But with new platforms, Web3, and fresh ideas, I see that number climbing. By 2025, Death Row could be worth $150 million or more as we unlock its full potential. The legacy lives on, and it's only getting bigger. Buying Death Row was a full-circle moment, a Hollywood ending to a wild ride. For me, it was more than just a business deal. It was a homecoming, a chance to reclaim a piece of my own story. Death Row wasn't just a label. It was the birthplace of a movement, a sound that changed the world and shaped who I am as an artist and a person. I watched the label I helped build get passed around, and I knew it belonged back with the creators. Seeing it in the hands of people who didn't understand the culture or the legacy was tough. I always felt a responsibility to protect what we started, to make sure the next generation could feel that same energy and inspiration. In 2022, the chance came up. Blackstone was selling, and I jumped in. I knew this was my shot to bring Death Row back to its roots, but also to take it somewhere new. The opportunity felt like destiny, like the universe was telling me it was time to step up and lead. This wasn't just business, it was about legacy. It was about honoring the artists who came before, the fans who supported us, and the culture that made Death Row legendary. I wanted to make sure the label stood for something real, something lasting. I put my team together, negotiated hard, and made it happen. It took vision, hustle, and a lot of late nights, but I was determined to see it through. Every step of the way, I thought about the artists, the music, and the fans who deserve better. In February 2022, Snoop Dogg became the owner of Death Row Records. It was a proud moment, not just for me, but for everyone who believed in the label's power and potential. I felt the weight of history on my shoulders, but also the excitement of a new beginning. The first new artist was now the boss. From being a young rapper in the studio to sitting at the head of the table, it was a journey I never could have predicted. But I was ready to lead, to make decisions that would shape the future of the label and the culture. My first move? Pull the catalog from streaming to build a new home for it. I wanted to take control of our music, to make sure it was valued and respected. It was a bold step, but necessary to protect the legacy and set the stage for what's next. My vision transformed Death Row into a future-focused label, embracing NFTs, the metaverse, and giving artists real ownership. I wanted to push boundaries, to use technology to empower creators and connect with fans in new ways. The future of music is digital, and Death Row is leading the charge. It's about honoring the past and building a new future. We're keeping the spirit alive, but we're also evolving, making sure Death Row stays relevant for generations to come. I want to sign new artists and give them the platform we had, but better. I want to open doors, break barriers, and help the next wave of talent shine even brighter than we did. Buying Death Row wasn't about nostalgia, it was about taking control of the future. It was about making sure the label stands for innovation, creativity, and real ownership for artists. The dog is back, and now I own the whole kennel. This is just the beginning. Watch what happens next. That's the story. Death Row from the beginning to now. We changed the game, built a movement, and made music that lives forever. I hope you got a real look at what we created and why it matters. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, hit that like button. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thanks for watching, for your energy, and for loving the culture. We'll keep bringing you more stories and classic vibes. Stay tuned, stay subscribed, and keep bumping that G-Funk sound. Until next time, this is Snoop Dogg signing off. Peace and love, y'all.